All right, welcome to Credible Live. We have a great topic today, and we have three of my favorite guests, on all together here. So we're going to be talking about life after the Farm Bill, hemp in 2025 and beyond. But we got to get to a Farm Bill before we can talk about life after it. So we've been anticipating a new Farm Bill for a long time now. So we're really going to explore the future of the hemp industry in the wake of this Farm Bill's next phase. And we're going to be talking about sort of where CBD and hemp is today, the difference between agricultural and industrial hemp, so it as a crop to be used for building materials and industrial purposes, and it for its cannabinoid purpose, CBD, and all of the other alphabet soup of CBD letters that we've now come in contact with, and talk about some of, I don't want to say loopholes, do I? But opportunistic ways that the CBD industry has gone about creating these intoxicating type hemp derivatives, shall we call them, and where that really where it ends and where the marijuana THC business begins and how we can sort of coexist. So real brief introduction, because you guys, all three of you, have been on the show before, so I think our audience knows you, but a quick brief introduction, a minute or so, starting with Joe Hickey.
This is Joe Hickey. I've been involved in the hemp industry since 92. I think it's 35 years, 35, however many it is. It's too many for me to remember, but
He was five. He was five when he started.
they're right. Yeah. And I reincorporated the 1942 Kentucky Hemp Growers Cooperative when I found it. And from there, I started looking into it. And, it's kind of like that thing, if you stick your toe in the water, and next thing you're up your neck in alligators after all these years later. But, I collected all that information, and one day got an opportunity to speak with the governor and talked him into forming a task force to look into trying to help the farmers that were losing their tobacco back then. That was when all the tobacco executives were swearing under oath that nicotine wasn't addictive. So I saw the writing on the wall, and he formed the task force, which really got us started. And then Woody Harrelson came in, heard about what we were doing. We were getting a lot of PR. And then we got the idea in 96 of planting 4 hemp seeds to challenge the law here in Kentucky. Went through 4 years, and basically it was a PR campaign is what it was, to educate, the general public in Kentucky, because the legislators weren't going to touch hemp because everybody thought hemp and marijuana were the same thing. So Woody was found not guilty in 2000. We finally got a bill passed in 2001 allowing farmers to research, farmers and universities to research hemp. So when the Farm Bill passed in 2014, that allowed us to plant the first seed, and that was from seed that we had collected here in Kentucky back in the early 90s. And we started in 98 when Canada legalized hemp. We started a company called Kennex. We were the first hemp and fiber processing facility in North America. And we brought the seeds to Canada and crossbred them with a Hungarian variety, and came up with the Denny variety. And that Denny was what we brought back and planted in the same field we took it out of. So it's been, we started the company in 2014 as a fiber and grain. We switched over to CBD, and that was probably the biggest mistake we made, because that CBD basically hijacked the industrial hemp industry. And that's where we find ourselves today, in this paradigm of like, what's going to help farmers the most, the cannabinoids or the fiber and grain? And so that's where we are today.
So for our audience, you can probably guess which side Joe is representing today.
No, I'm on both sides, but I take CBD every day. And we've got a technology that's great for the CBD business, but I'm not going to put my self-interest ahead of the farmers that I've been fighting for the last 35 years. So that's
Well,
where
I think we can make it work for the farmers on both sides. And one of those people that is helping the farmer on the cannabinoid side is Jenna Murray. And although she's a hemp advocate on all sides of the aisle, but Jenna, give us a quick introduction of yourself.
Yeah, hey guys, I'm Jenna Murray here, Director of Quality and Regulatory for Medterra CBD, and also proudly the president of the U.S. Hemp Roundtable, which is the leading advocacy group for hemp. We represent all aspects of hemp, grain and fiber, all farmers, and the cannabinoid side, of course. And just really passionate about the plant in general, and cannabis as a plant. I'm very passionate about, and with how versatile hemp is, I find it very interesting, and really looking forward to this fun discussion today.
And I love how we talk about cannabis as a plant, and of course, cannabis is grown both for hemp purposes as well as for marijuana. And I know Tyler's an advocate for the plant and for both sides as well. But Tyler, give us a quick introduction of yourself.
Thanks, Brian. It's good to be here. My name's Tyler Klimas. I'm the principal and founder of Leaf Street Strategies. This is a consulting firm, and we work with clients both on the cannabis and hemp side. Prior to launching Leaf Street, I was the chief cannabis regulator in the state of Nevada. I came out to Nevada 2019 from Washington, D.C., where I was a federal lobbyist and stood up the most recent regulatory body over Nevada's medical and adult use marketplace. And I regulated cannabis there for almost 5 years. Also in that time, I helped to form with a few other regulators, the Cannabis Regulators Association, which is CANRA, if you're familiar, where we got to work on, best practices in cannabis and in hemp regulation, and then really create a voice for those regulators in Washington, D.C. And obviously I regulated cannabis since 2019. So really was there overseeing a program when hemp coming out of 2018 started to show up in synthetics, et cetera. So it's been a very interesting handful of years. And thanks for having me, Brian. I look forward to this discussion today.
Well, thank you. And it's great to have all three of you on board. And we're going to talk about about what's going on sort of with the Farm Bill. And we can all speculate on that and talk about it, but we know that there's lots of crazy stuff going on with the various states. Some states are completely villainizing CBD hemp, and they just want to kill it altogether in any form or trace of THC, which does not make sense at all. And others are trying to find safe ways of making this happen while the federal guidelines are being formed. So we've got this patchwork of regulation going on at the state level. We've got the federal side trying to figure out which end is up and what they should do about it. But the bottom line is, before we talk about this, I used the term before loophole, and we had a lively discussion before about whether we should use the term loophole, but it's the opportunity. So what opportunity did the industry take to advance through research and development to go beyond what was originally intended in the Farm Bill? And I think that was a very diplomatic way of putting it. But the bottom line is what I have seen, and I use an example of a friend who never tried any marijuana before, went to a CBD store, bought a chocolate bar that was huge. And he was shocked when he got intoxicated as he got high off of this thing. And he called me and said, I don't know what happened. Like, this is supposed to be CBD. And I had to explain to him that it's CBD by dry weight. It's THC by dry weight, not CBD, but it's 0.3% THC by dry weight, which is the limit in the Farm Bill. So that was intended, obviously, to keep hemp products as non-intoxicating, but it's created an opportunity to make the bar bigger. So we make that chocolate bar bigger by net weight. Guess what happens percentage wise? You can put more THC in there, and now all of a sudden you have like a 4 gram gummy can legally contain up to 12 milligrams of Delta 9. But if you make that bigger, then all of a sudden, percentage wise, the amount of THC in it is greater. And then, of course, we have the alphabet soup of other THCA, THCO, or THC 0, or whatever it is. And now all of a sudden, there's all these different things that are sort of changing the THC content, or what they can actually do, and making people high. And we do know that emergency rooms visits have increased as a result of some of those things. So the discussion is, and what everybody's sort of panicking about, or some people are panicking about in states, is this is bad stuff. But they didn't realize they can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So having laid that out, because I take CBD, I use it, and it helps me tremendously. But if that were to go away, myself and a whole bunch of other consumers who take this product for their wellness are going to be impacted. And didn't we learn that there's a black market that will get created, and that's where it's going to go? So given all the recent delays, now here's the question to our panelists. Given all the recent delays and the proposed changes, and all of this background that we just talked about, where do things stand with the new farm bill as it relates to hemp and CBD? And what are some of the key issues that are holding this up?
I can jump in and start here. So for a farm bill specifically, there have been no significant discussions of the farm bill this year, really, which is interesting because we're already delayed on that. And there was some renewals and things, but kind of since then, and when I was in DC in January, meeting with some staffers and things, it was almost a joke when the farm bill got brought up, because everyone's like, we don't know what's going to happen. No one's really talking about it. However, there was an ag appropriations bill put forward that is typically similar to a farm bill, but it is for, the appropriation side. And that had some interesting language in it for hemp specifically, among many other aspects. But it seems like the appropriations bill does not typically really move or pass out of, both houses and senates and all of its committees. However, with some interesting language sneaking up, I think the industry's taking it serious, just to make sure that nothing pops up if and when the farm bill does kind of recirculate.
So crickets on the farm bill. There's an appropriations bill, which is essentially a big spending bill, right? And you've got these hemp things sitting in this spending bill. And from what I've seen, some of those things they make no sense, because they would decimate, an entire industry of CBD, the way that it's written. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. The way the current ag-approps language is written, there are protections for the industrial side and for the farmers. So there is that side, but when it comes to the consumable side of things, they kind of get into some non-detect, non-quantifiable amounts of THC, and that is where it gets very tricky, even from a growing standpoint, because it is nearly impossible to grow any cannabis sativa L plant without any detectable amounts of THC in it. Because that THC comes out with stress, and Joe can talk on that way better than I can. But so it definitely has some interesting implications, especially for the consumable hemp side of things.
Yeah, because the in that bill, they're talking about severely restricting the compounds by including total THC, not just Delta 9 or some of the other alphabet soup ones, but by definition, the original farm bill was supposed to be Delta 9 THC in total. And what we saw is these synthetic or chemically converted cannabinoids like Delta 8 and THCP, and again, the alphabet soup, that went beyond that to create naturally, to go beyond unnaturally occurring cannabinoids. So it seems to be like we need to get back to the naturally occurring cannabinoids, which we could certainly draw a line, but the language in this appropriations bill is all encompassed, which I personally don't believe it has a chance of getting passed, because there's a lot of things in there from spending that will just bog down the rest of the bill. But that's just my personal opinion. What do you guys think, Joe or Tyler?
Well, I don't think, you're saying that drawing a line that at the 0.3, once you isolate and concentrate the material, it doesn't matter what percentage it is. It can be 0.3, it can be 0.2, it could be 0.5. It doesn't make any difference, because now that they figured out you can concentrate and isolate, it doesn't make any difference. So that to me is where it draws the line for me. Not in how much cannabinoid is in there. It is whether you.
Well, looks like we lost Joe. Did Joe disappeared, right?
Yeah, I lost Joe as well.
Okay.
Let me see. I'm gonna try another way.
There he is. Oh, we got you back, Joe. I'm
gonna get off my phone and I'm gonna come back on this other. There we go. Can you let me in on this other side?
Yep, we see you. We got you.
Oh,
Look, we get two Joes. All right, now we're back to one Joe. Good.
there we go. Let me turn this
back,
off
Joe.
here. Okay, there we go. Now, but concentrate. What I was saying is, if you concentrate and isolate, the 0.3 doesn't make any difference, and that's why when you hear people talking about intoxicating hemp now, is because of the isolation and the concentration isolation.
Well, what do you mean it doesn't make any? What do you mean it doesn't make any difference? Meaning
that
it's still...
to me has changed everything in the industry. Where we need to look at this industry is: are you growing for cannabinoids, or are you growing for fiber and grain? Just like Canada did. Canada, what farmers will not grow fiber and grain if they're going to have the opportunity, or not the opportunity, the possibility of the law enforcement coming in and say, "Oh, you're 0.4, so we're going to destroy your whole crop." So what Canada has done is, if you have your receipt where you're buying certified seed that's 0.3 or below, then they don't even come out and test you. They don't do. You're just free to do whatever you want, because if you're growing certified seed, and I talked to the head of Health Canada, and he said, "Look, we know that the growing conditions can change depending on the weather and the soil conditions and everything else." He said it may go up to 0.8. We don't care, because we know that they're growing it for fiber or grain. If you're growing for cannabinoids, it's a whole different story. You get tested. Anything that you're doing for fiber or for cannabinoids, for human consumption, you should have all the safety protocols in place to ensure that everything is safe for human consumption.
But yeah, Canada
but
has.
If you're growing for fiber and grain, you should have to go under the same protocols as corn, wheat, rye, and the other grains.
Right.
And the only reason we're even going through a lot of this is because when they started the grass program back in 1958, they left out hemp, because hemp was illegal back then. So that's why we're getting the FDA in the middle of this thing and having to reapply for feeding grain to animals and everything else. To me, it started with the FBN, with Federal Bureau of Narcotics, and then it came up to the DEA, and now that the DEA is out of the way, now we got the FDA in the middle of it.
What do you think, Tyler?
It's 2 ppm to feeding chickens. So the whole thing of saying that intoxicating hemp or cannabis above 0.3, converting or contorting and bringing those two together does nothing for American farmers, the majority of American farmers. it only hurts them.
Yeah. Well, Brian, I think, I mean, all good points. And I think, you take a step back and you look at the
You
18.
guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear us?
I don't think you can hear us, Joe.
I don't think Joe can hear us.
I don't have.
Audio. Yeah, he doesn't have audio. But go ahead, Tyler.
Yeah. So I was just going to say, like I said, great points, but going back to 18, I mean, listen, we can debate what the terminology loophole or not, but whether it was inadvertent or totally deliberate, I think when we're looking at whether it's the Miller Amendment last year, both Farm Bill appropriations, the appropriations language this year, what I think we can agree on is that Congress feels, and this is not a guess, right? Congress feels duped with this hemp program. Yes. What they had in their mind or what their anticipations were is not and has not been, what is happening. And I think, Jenna, you brought up the approach language. I think the terminology of quantifiable is very significant. That is kind of contemplating, what level of hemp, before it was just Delta 9, obviously things have changed quite rapidly. So, looking towards the federal agencies, the FDA or the Department of Ag to try to kind of contemplate what is a quantifiable amount. Maybe that is the delineation. But regardless, Congress feels concern, which is why they're bringing up this kind of language. Does it make it to the finish line? Who knows? Is it just symbolic? Who knows? I think a question is, do states look at this, whether or not it passes? Did they take direction? And we know that they've been kind of patchwork in how they're addressing this, but do they take some direction even from the proposed language? But regardless, I don't think there is a general comfort level with what is happening. And so, we've got to move. And I think what we all want on all sides is moving to some kind of clear baseline, some kind of clear distinction between, what is intoxicating, what is not. Look at that. I mean, the definitions across the states on what's intoxicating and not intoxicating is all over the place. So, yeah, we're not going to see a farm bill. Maybe we see some movement with this approach language. And obviously it's going to finish in a very different form than it is now. But the bottom line is there is a need across the board. I think there's a want and desire across the board that we've got to have some kind of clear frameworks, clear guidelines around, what is and what isn't, if we're going to actually proceed and get out of this chaotic kind of atmosphere that we're at now.
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean the Ninth and Fourth Circuit courts, ruled that the hemp-derived cannabinoids of the 18 Farm Bill were copacetic, and clearly Congress, is that part of what you're saying? How does Congress feel duped on this? What is their thinking on this? Because their changes go totally opposite end of the spectrum. And obviously the industry and the states are all over the place on it. So,
yeah, I mean, we talk about the verbiage loophole. I mean, if you look at the commentary and the remarks from members of Congress in these discussions, they say this language will close the loophole, right? And yes, that is not every single member of Congress, but I mean, that is obviously a tenor and a narrative that is kind of seeping through. And we see that in the states. I mean, look at Texas, right? Which has taken, arguably outside of California's emergency regulations, the most drastic measures, right, with state legislation for the same kind of narrative, the same kind of talking points. We matched the Farm Bill language. We authorized an agricultural legislation in Texas, and we did not anticipate, we did not expect this to happen. And it has. Right or wrong, whatever side you're on, that's how they feel. And that's what they're talking about. And again, I'm not painting the entire legislature with that broad brush, nor am I painting the entirety of Congress with that broad brush, but those are obviously the talking points that are happening now. And so that's why, Brian, there is a feeling there. And yes, the language that comes out, total bans, any quantifiable THC, is that realistic at this point? Probably not. But is that the starting point to get to some place where we start to bring clarity for states, for businesses, for farmers, for Congress? We got to hope that is a starting point, because obviously this is not working as we currently sit here today.
That makes a lot of sense. I think you've explained that very well, and I guess I would feel duped as well because it was not the original intention
Yep.
of what they were coming out with. So so you almost can't blame them for sort of taking this knee jerk reaction of saying, okay, we're just going to ban it all. But we do know that that's not a good place to end up. I mean, I believe it's not a good place to end up. I mean, if it gets rid of some of the alphabet soup and the dangerous synthetics, I mean, that's not why I take this stuff. I don't touch that stuff. I mean, I stay in my lane and take the regular, CBD, full spectrum, where I know what it is I'm consuming and I'm for a specific purpose. So I can see you've explained it really well, but where do we end up? I mean, what do you think is likely to happen here? What's a likely outcome?
Well, I think what's happening right now is the legislators are listening to the regulators. And the regulators have been doing the same thing for so many years. It's like, your grandfather was in the Army, so your dad went in the Army, so I'm in the Army. And that's what's happened with this through the history, through the Federal Bureau of Narcotics to the DEA, and then now to the FDA. Hell, they just passed the other day. Now they're not going to allow any hemp foods in SNAP programs. They just announced that, and the only reason they're doing that is because I have no idea what's behind the FDA's refusal to allow even they won't allow two ppm of hemp meal to be fed to chickens. And nobody realizes what 2 ppm stands for. I mean, in the real world, what does 2 ppm mean? You can't quantify it. But when you say 2 ppm is 2 inches in 15.78 miles, then it gives you how crazy this is. And now we're saying, well, let's raise it to 20 ppm. So that's 20 inches in 15.78 miles. So to me, it's these like you said, when you say alphabet, I think of the DEA, the FDA, all these alphabet agencies have been the one that have really led this whole misinformation campaign that is turning the legislators into these warriors against THC.
So let's talk about real quick the sort of a little bit of the headbutting that goes on. That's obvious, right? With the licensed marijuana companies, right, that are lobbying for bans to eliminate competition. We know that's happening in California, and we know that they're struggling enough, the licensed marijuana side of the business in California, that of course they're going to lobby against a ban to eliminate competition from unregulated hemp products because they feel like, hey, I spent all this time, I spent all this money, I'm taxed, I got 280E to deal with, and now I got my customers buying this intoxicating hemp as an alternative, and that's not fair, right? So Tyler, you and I have talked about this before, about how we can develop through this change in legislation, really a peaceful coexistence by each of them staying in their own lanes through this regulation. And I know you're a believer of that, like both can peacefully coexist as long as we get it right. So what has to change to get it right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, we're going to have to give the federal agencies some authorization and some ownership over this. So let's say it's the FDA, which obviously you could argue should have that power today, but we know what has happened there with resources, et cetera. But we've got to create some kind of baseline, rules and restrictions, but also authorizations. And we talk, Brian, a lot. We've got to create the floor. Right. And we don't even have a floor. It's like absent. It's a free fall or free up. I don't know what it is, but we've got to create some kind of floor for the FDA to look at these products in general. And listen, I know we love to pile on the federal government, but let's not let them off the hook. If the federal government would have recognized the growing THC market in legal cannabis in the United States and had acted appropriately, we probably wouldn't seen this massive proliferation of hemp products utilizing, whether you think it's inadvertent or not. But that's where we are. So we obviously need to push towards that. But when you say, coexist, I mean, absent some of this language and this very restrictive language making it across the finish line, which I guess is possible, and we see that in some of the states. When you look at other areas of hemp products, it's a spectrum. There's the worst cases of the products you're finding in like smoke shops and gas stations and convenience stores, but then there's better cases like beverages, for example, which have seemingly separated themselves from other hemp product categories. They're being sold in normal retailers like Total Wine and more in multiple states. And so maybe that alludes to a final product form regulation. And this is a perfect world scenario in which we do not live. But when you talk about coexisting, again, in addition, in coordination with a federal floor and an agency that can make sure products are safe, maybe eventually we are looking at final product forms that are THC, regardless of where they're derived from, if they come from hemp or they come from cannabis. What are the product safety guidelines around those THC products? Where are the appropriate retail avenues for those THC products? What are the categories of low dose, moderate dose, high dose, intoxicating, non-intoxicating, which captures those CBD products that should not be intoxicating? And then the higher THC products, no matter what they're derived from, and where they should be sold and how they interact in a state. And then finally, when we do open up interstate commerce, which is inevitable, how the federal government plays a role in overseeing that. And so, Brian, I mean, obviously those are just high level points, but unfortunately, I think that's the position we find ourselves in. We're thinking about that from a higher 30,000 foot level before we can drill down. Right now, we just don't even have that opportunity.
Well, Joe talked about Canada, and the Canadian CBD product market is pretty strong. I mean, relatively speaking, relative to the size of the market in Canada, I mean, you're looking at almost a $200 million projection for just CBD products in Canada. So we do know that there's high consumer demand there. And to your point, I think it's the confusion doesn't exist because unlike here in the U.S., they have a federally approved THC market.
Exactly.
So I sort of read between the lines, and what you're saying is we did the same thing here. We'd have an easier time delineating, that line of demarcation and providing safety and quality regulations for each side of it. So here's your lane, and it's well defined with safety standards and quality standards, and we can both coexist in that form. But because we have this federal sort of allowance through the Farm Bill on CBD, which has gotten a bit out of control, and then we have this only non-federal but just state-approved marijuana. It creates a lot of the issues. Is that sort of what you're saying?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Which is why we need to bring a federal framework into these discussions. We've seen legislation out there that provides avenues for that. We have not seen these things get close to the finish line. And so now we're left with language in the 11th hour that's put into appropriations packages. We see Farm Bill that has been, simply continued on year after year. No opportunity there to close or clarify, if you don't want to use that language, just to clarify it. Would be a huge step forward.
But yet there's crickets on the Farm Bill, and I think this is all symptomatic of this issue, because, I mean, clearly that if they went too far the other way, if there's a ban on any THC in the hemp CBD side, we do know that what will happen is there will be still demand for those products, and there'll be a black market. So we can eliminate this through federal guidelines and approvals, but I don't think that's right around the corner. Jenna, you've been quiet. What do you think?
It's an interesting topic. I do think ultimately most of the hemp and I hate the marijuana word, but the marijuana guys, I do think we all ultimately want to be able to, coexist and just kind of more work together, and figure it out. I think, ultimately it's all the same plant, right? So we should regulate the plant and, the form factors, just as Tyler was kind of expressing. I do agree with that fully. It's just a matter of getting some federal clarity to open that up, because I know that's always the issue when I am on Capitol Hill and talking to state regulators and things. If you start to lean into like full legalization, then you lose them typically. And it's an interesting concept, to me, because I sometimes think of it as alcohol and kombucha. Kombucha has low levels of alcohol in it, and is regulated differently. And I mean, let's be serious. If a kid pounds multiple kombuchas, I'm pretty sure they're going to get drunk. I kind of think of it a little bit like that. But to get that mindset to kind of transfer over is definitely a challenging thing. But I feel like every day, it's becoming more and more normalized, which is good for our industry. And I think that we just need to keep educating and making sure that products are safe, that are being sold, and not having major issues, so that way we can continue to have a strong argument as to why these products can exist in a market.
So yet and Joe, for in thinking about this from an industrial or agricultural crop, the United States imports significant quantities of hemp for industrial purposes today. And you and I have talked about this, that there's not a good, predictable or sustainable supply chain yet. And this is why Ford Motor Company and all these other companies aren't going to go to making plastics or parts out of hemp for now, because they don't have a stable supply chain. But yet the United States is importing significant quantities of hemp for industrial purposes. And where are they getting it? I mean, they're getting it from lots of other places. They're getting it from China. They're getting it from the Netherlands. There's a whole, so there is a demand for this, right? But yet we're not getting it from our own farms. And when you look at like just comparing how much corn is grown in the U.S. to how much hemp is grown, I mean, it's like not even 1% if you were to compare to like, the corn production, and 14% of corn production goes overseas today. Right. So, but yet we are not even growing an iota of this hemp for industrial purposes. What say you on that?
Well, here's the whole issue right here. When we talk about a supply chain, which is the lifeblood of any industry, the supply chain in hemp right now has to start with the big corporations, the ones that are going to be using the majority of it, the Teslas, the Fords, the aerospace industry, because if they would just agree, like on FIHO, the Federation of International Hemp Organizations, on the website has a pledge that these industries can make. And basically the pledge is like whenever you have a solid supply chain, a good, a comparable price and a quality, then we'll buy. And, or, whatever specs they want to put in there, then that gives the impetus for a processor to spend money, organize the farmers, and spend money, build a processing facility, because they know they've got end use for it. Because right now it's a chicken and egg. Farmers aren't going to grow something they can't sell. The processors aren't going to spend millions of dollars on a processing facility unless they have the farmers and the end use. And the end use guys aren't going to do it until all their specs are met. So it's like, who's going to jump off first? And what I say is, we're either going to go down the road of soybeans and be 150 to 200 years to become a commodity, or we're going to do this in an organized manner, and in 15 or 20 years, then it'll start to become a real commodity. And, we were talking about whiskey and corn earlier on, and corn is a commodity. I wouldn't say whiskey is a commodity, but we're using corn to make whiskey. But you don't see the whiskey industry and the corn industry working together to come up with, because the truth is probably 99.99% of the corn grown in the United States doesn't go to whiskey. Most of that stuff that's grown here in Kentucky is organic corn that they're using. So it's a way of looking at it of, an overall picture of it. Do we spend our money to help 99% of the farmers and all our efforts to help those farmers, or do we continue down this road of, convoluting the hemp and marijuana, or the cannabinoid and fiber and grain, I think is a better way of putting it.
And that's a remaining barrier. So even if you got Ford and Tesla to step up and say, hey, okay, if we can get a sustainable supply chain, we will step up. They're hesitant to do that, I would imagine, because of the lingering regulatory uncertainty, and there's competition from global suppliers and the need for FDA approval. So the industry's path forward seems to hinge now on this continued federal and state collaboration to finalize standards to expand market access, right? So it all goes back to the regulations creating two lines of demarcation. One between agricultural and cannabinoid purposes, right? And the other, where does the THC industry begin and where does the CBD THC industry end? Right? It seems like those have to be two very clearly defined lines. And then, of course, go back and create the standards around those things to make it clear, and then eventually federalize it, right? There can be a path here. Am I thinking too simply about this?
The regulators, just like this SNAP program, the FDA had to be behind this, but the FDA says we don't want any hemp in the SNAP program. No hemp meal, no hemp milk, no hemp grain, no protein powder. None of this stuff is allowed now in the SNAP program, which is absolutely ridiculous. Why would they do that? I mean, so there's until we get the regulators off the farmers' back, we're going to continue to have these issues. And it seemed like one issue after another. The DEA had to be sued because they didn't want hemp foods to be allowed, and the DEA got sued, and that allowed the grain and stuff to be brought, the protein powder and the hemp nut to be sold commercially. But
what has to happen to get everybody singing off the same song sheet?
I would say fire a lot of the FDA people and put someone in there that's not bought and paid for by the industry.
Didn't we try that already? Didn't we try
what industry allows drug companies to put all these drugs on television and say at the end of it, well, and you get a chance, you're going to have diarrhea, you're going to have congestive heart failure and
death.
But whatever you do, don't feed animals 2% ppm of THC, and don't put hemp, that's a healthy alternative to a lot of things, in the SNAP program. If anything, they ought to say the SNAP program, you have to spend 10% of your money in the SNAP program on hemp protein and hemp foods.
But where would we get all of our catchy jingles if we didn't have?
Well, that's true.
So what do you think? Tyler, what has to happen? What do we have to do to sort of, I know you've been working on a lot of this and you talk to a lot of different players. What has to happen?
Yeah, no, I think, Joe, I don't know if you'd agree. I mean, I think a lot of that comes from this confusion, right? Yeah. Because it is confusing. I mean, it changes daily for those in the industry. And then you try to translate that to lawmakers, whether at the state or the federal level. And, they're hearing, just where we're at with the two different sides. They're hearing two different sets of talking points. It's very hard to get consensus within the hemp industry and in the cannabis industry. CMSOs and larger cannabis companies get into hemp now, further kind of confusing. Again, what are these ultimate talking points and what's the ultimate ask for the federal government? But, some of the things in that approach language. They create or they allude to the FDA looking at CBD oil in the context of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. Right? They want to create a quantifiable THC task force, right? To look at what is a quantifiable amount. And so again, you can't say that those aren't elements and movements and recognition that there's clarity, but obviously, moving at the speed of government is a whole nother ball game. But yeah, I mean, again, not to beat the dead horse, but we've got to clarify, Brian, and if it's through those elements, in task force or federal legislation, then that's great. But until we do clarify, until we create these strict lines, it's going to continue to be like this. And, we're going to see initiatives and proposals, whether it's in SNAP or not, that may not make sense or may not be based in the realities of the market today.
Well, you know what I always say, if THC was such a health problem, these rest homes and hospitals would be full of hippies.
You're not wrong there, Joe.
Well, it'd be a lot more fun in a rest home, I guess. They're doing it in Israel. I mean, you look at the research that's been done in Israel, and I know that a lot of the rest homes and the retirement communities, they utilize CBD products.
Yeah.
So
it's Reefer Madness revisited. It's Reefer Madness. That's what I'm saying. It's come from the 1920s to the 30s, the 40s, and it just followed the industry because that's what they've always done. And when a new head of the FDA comes in, they have this is what we've been doing. This is what we do. So to me, it's more of, it's not one person that is against it. It's just this regulatory framework that has been passed on to us generation after generation that's got us where we are today.
Well, this has been a fascinating discussion. I personally believe not that the appropriations bill is going to be completely killed as it relates to hemp, but they're going to have to water it down to get the rest of that thing through, because this is such a controversial topic that typically what I've seen lawmakers do is if they want to get the thing through, they've got to start paring back different things in order to move it forward. Otherwise, it never moves forward, and it's not going to be helpful if they can't move the appropriations bill.
Well, what's happened lately too is when they reversed the Chevron agreement, which are the Chevron deference, because they gave deference to the agencies over the judicial. If the agency said, well, we want it to be this, but if it's arbitrary and capricious because of this, the Supreme Court reversed the Chevron deference, now we can sue these agencies for these arbitrary and capricious rulings. So to me, I think we ought to start suing the FDA and make them prove what they're saying. You just can't arbitrarily say 2 ppm is all we're going to allow. Where'd that come from? There's no science behind it. So I think, to me, everybody would stand up and pay attention if we sued the FDA and showed how arbitrary and capricious their rulings have been and continue to be that are stymieing the hemp industry.
Well, that's above my legal bill, but anyway. But we just got to make sure we don't put Woody Harrelson back in jail again over by making everything illegal, right? You don't want to have to bail him out again. Well, guys, thanks so much for joining us. This has been an incredible discussion on once again on Credible Live, and we're going to be following obviously this movement. I'd love to, just check in at time to time to be talking about this, and I love the perspective all three of you have brought today. So thank you for joining us once again on Credible Live.